Good day, everyone. Welcome to our next in our series of our Taste of Training webinars. Today, we're going to be talking about Kibana best practices for visualizing time series data. My name is Will Dinyas. I'm an education engineer here at Elastic. I've got some folks helping us out in the chat room. We'll get to them in just a second. But in case you were wondering what I look like, since you can't see me just yet, there is a fantastic photograph of myself and, of course, my title and the company that I work for. So I want to just welcome everybody to our webinar today. We've got a whole bunch of registrations. I'm hoping we got a whole bunch of people attending. And of course, if you're listening to this on a recording, thank you for downloading this recording and um, being a part of our webinar ecosystem here at Elastic. We have tons of great webinars out there covering all sorts of different topics and details. Just a couple of housekeeping logistics. If you have questions for me, while I am not in the IRC chat room at the moment, just to keep the number of notifications to a minimum in my personal field of view, we do have an Elastic webinar chat room on Freenode. You can actually join the chat link. If you need to create an IRC account, you can. In our IRC chat room today, helping me out with some questions are Rich Raposa and Dominic Page, who, if you have been attending some of these Taste of Training webinars, you may recognize those names as having done the last couple of these webinars for us. If you are viewing this on YouTube, please select a high-res quality. I'm going to be doing a lot of screen sharing and a lot of clicking around our UI, and you're going to want to be able to see what I'm doing. And as usual, a recording will be available after this webinar is complete. So just a quick note for folks who may not be familiar with the entire Elastic Stack. Elastic Stack is made up of Beats and Logstash for getting data in to Elasticsearch, where it is stored, can be searched, can be analyzed. And of course, at the Kibana level, which is where we're going to be living today, you can visualize and manage your entire stack from there. We have a couple of layers below the Elastic Stack. We have self-managed. You can download all of these tools, install them on your local system, and play with them to your heart's content. We also have Elastic Cloud Enterprise, which you can deploy in your own data center. And we have software as a service, the Elastic Cloud itself, available as well. On top of the stack, we've built a bunch of solutions, things like APM for monitoring your application performance, SIEM for your security needs, and all kinds of other solutions built on top of that. And we have many, many courses in addition to the Kibana course that I'm talking about today that cover a lot of these technologies as well. But let's take a look at what we're going to be dealing with today. This is Kibana Visual Builder. This is a module from our Elastic Kibana Data Analyst course that is available today. It's just been recently updated to version 7, so we're at parity with our latest releases of the Elastic Stack. And this particular module covers all aspects of the time series visual builder. It also gets into some other features of things like timeline and so on and so forth. But for this webinar, for the purposes of this webinar, since I only have an hour, we're going to focus on the visual builder for time series. The visual builder for time series has a bunch of different aggregations all rolled into a single builder interface. It makes it very easy to build very customized visualizations, a lot more customizations than are available in the I want to click on this gauge or I want to click on this table and then build it out that way. You can deal with background colors. You can customize the background colors based on data. And you can also combine multiple index patterns in a single visualization. That's a great tool because it's going to allow you to take perhaps log information from multiple sources and put them into a single visualization so you can do a quick compare and contrast, maybe see which of your servers are being used the most and so on. And one of the cool things on this is that it supports annotations, which you can actually have loaded automatically onto your visualization to flag maybe events, security events, or other logging events that you are interested in. Inside the visual builder, you've got a bunch of different aggregations that you have available to you. You have overall maximum minimum. There's pipeline aggregations that you can work with, static values that you can layer on top of your visualization. You have a lot more flexibility. Your time series can be shifted within the aggregation, within the visualization itself. You can then take series that you've already built, you can clone them to make easy fixes. You can change the styling very easily with the markdown tooling. And again, we might note here a second time that we have multiple index patterns available to us when we are building these visualizations. Here's a very simple one showing the annotations. So we've got this lovely visualization here of some log data, and what we have here is some annotations coming in from perhaps a separate series of data that's going to allow us to flag maybe security errors or something along those lines. And what you get when you hover over these tooltips, you can customize the tooltip. You can get all kinds of great information built straight into that tooltip for you. It makes it very easy to see events as they happen within your visual builder. Static values are really powerful tools. Maybe you want to put a static value on your visualization to say, hey, I'm watching this visualization. We're about to hit some sort of maximum, or we want to make sure that we're operating at above some speed, maybe some ingest speed or something along those lines that we want to take care of. And basically what this is going to do for you is allow you to have a very easy visualization to say, I'm about to run into trouble. Let me catch this before it goes south on me. So the static values are a really excellent tool to throw onto your visualizations. We'll see some of those. The math aggregation, you can do all kinds of mathematical operations. You can build in expressions using the tiny math expression language, and you can actually pull in the variables from different aggregations even, right? So you can pull in a max or a min, and you can do ratios and so on. We're going to do actually a ratio example in our demonstration that we're going to get to here in just a minute. Here it is, the filter ratio aggregation. This is a really excellent tool that means that you don't have to worry necessarily about the absolute value of the records that you have. You're taking a look at a ratio. Maybe you're doing a ratio between the instances coming in from a particular country versus the total number of instances, the total number of hits that are coming in, or anything along those lines. And what this is actually going to be able to do as well is using the Lucene syntax, you can actually filter this information on the numerator and the denominator to actually give you a lot of power there. We're going to show you that as well. You don't just have to do time series. You can also use metrics, gauges, top end markdown tables. And if you're looking at this and going, you know what, I recognize all of those as visualizations that are already available in Kibana, that's absolutely true. But you're going to have a lot more flexibility doing this with the visual builder. One thing to keep in mind, though, and we're actually going to see this in the demonstration as well, visualizations are not going to work on the whole time series. They actually take the last piece of that time series, and that's what goes into the actual visualizations for metrics, gauges, markdown, and so on. And that's actually another powerful tool. It gives you that sort of real-time updating as your data builds out over time, of course. Metrics, you can build out a couple of metrics, maybe an overall total plus the limited total for a particular count, and you can actually build in multiple visualizations with this. The colors, one of the cool things on this is you can actually set colors based on these thresholds, based on a criteria, which would allow you to maybe flag your metric with a red flag if it's approaching a limit or something along those lines. Similarly, the top N, it's a nice bar chart that you can build out. It uses terms aggregations. Again, it's the conditional coloring is fantastic on these things so that you can really flag things very easily. And as your time series advances, you can pull this up. One of the cool things that I love about Markdown is that if you folks have seen the Markdown tools before, one of the things that you can do with the Markdown in the visual builder is you can actually have dynamic elements. So I can actually put in, using the mustache syntax, I can actually put in perhaps a count of records, an average of records, a sum of records, and just put this on a very simple screen that's going to allow us to interact with it. Also, I can use a custom style sheet, a cascading style sheet. That should say cascading style sheet there. I can use a cascading style sheet to actually customize how that looks. So I'm not stuck with just some basic fonts or whatever. Anything that I can do with a CSS, I can now apply to my markdowns as well. The table visualization, it's pretty similar to the pre-built one, but there are a few more aggregations available than what you have using that pre-built table example. So without further ado, since the best way to view all of this stuff is for me to do a demo of it, I'm going to click us over to a demo of all of this good stuff, and we will actually be able to see this all working. So here's our Kibana interface, the brand new version 7 of the Kibana interface. Look at all these fun tools that we have available to us now. Here in the visualize, let me show you this. So if we come into the visualize area and we click on this plus, what you'll see here is you'll see all the common visualizations that you're used to. Now, when you click on gauge, for instance, or one of these, the first thing that you're asked is what index pattern are you going to pull these details from? With the visual builder, you don't get asked that. It takes you straight into the visual builder, and oftentimes you're presented with this lovely time series data or whatever data you have, and maybe it's not doing anything because you're looking at an old aggregation or an old collection of these. So the very first thing that I do whenever I come into this is I make sure that I'm actually looking at the data that I expected to look at. Well, log server is not the pattern that I want to use. What I actually want to use is my Apache data that I've loaded up here, and it's got an @ timestamp field because the Apache data in this case is getting close to actually using the elastic common schema. Not quite there yet, but once we change this and we come back over here to our data, well, still nothing. It turns out that my data here is actually a little old, so I need to change my time range a little bit. And there, now we have some data. So as always, you want to make sure that you've got a time range that actually applies to the data that you're looking at, and you want to make sure that you're looking at the proper data. And the place to start with the time series visual builder is in the panel options to make sure you're looking at the right field. You can change your interval here. By default, it's going to go to auto, but I can change this to say maybe 3 hours. It gives me a little more spikiness, but I've got some idea of what's going on there with my data over time. I can put in things like a panel filter. For instance, if I was really only caring about response codes in the 400 range, for instance, I could do something like this, a response 400 to 500. And this is Lucene query syntax, but there we go. And it's automatically, you'll notice that it's auto applying my updates. I had a couple of times here where I had some big errors, big numbers of errors coming in here. But I can do these panel responses. I can change my axis min, axis max. I can change my scale from a normal to a logarithmic. Of course, that kind of flattens the data out there as well. And I can do things like change my background color. I'll choose an interesting color here, something like that. This is going to change my view. Ugh, excuse me. Sorry, folks. One of the benefits of being a colorblind person is that I don't have to worry about what the colors actually are. So we're going to take this back to the full set of data. All kinds of things that you can do there on the panel options. But let's go back to the data and take a look at some ways that we can slice through this data. So mostly you folks are used to having that lovely little builder off to the left-hand side that says what kind of aggregation you're going to do and so on. Well, now the builder is down towards the bottom, right? By default, what we're starting with here is a count of everything. So we've got this huge count of everything available to us. Maybe, though, we don't really care about this count. This is really the number of hits. Maybe we want to take a look at, say, the average number of bytes that are coming in to my data. Oh, well, interesting. Look at this. I got a spike right here where the average number of downloaded bytes was jumped up there. But let's take a look at this average of bytes. Maybe I want to filter this out just a little bit, and I want to do something along the lines of, say, write in a filter here that's going to filter by country. So let's say we take some GeoIP data out of our code here, and I do a GeoIP country code 2 FR, and this is France. All right, so there's the average of bytes coming out of France for us. We're going to change this to a nice little blue color. All right, so now we've got France all set, and I can actually replicate this, add another one, if I wanted to throw another one on this. And let's say we wanted to do Germany as well. Germany. So now we've got Germany and France sort of layered on top of each other. Let me go ahead and change Germany's color here as well to make it just a little easier to see. We'll go with a reddish color there. So we've got our red and our blue there. And this is our average of bytes coming in here. So handy to have this available to us. Lots of data coming in though. So let's actually do something else. Let's layer another series on top of this. And what I can do is, here's my first series. I'm going to actually clone my series in this case. And let's do this as, instead of, notice that it gives us the exact same data, but let's, instead of an average of bytes, let's do a sum. Let's make this the sum of the bytes. All right? So that's going to change the value just a little bit. We can even do this as a count instead. I can change my colors. Maybe I make these a little darker so that I have a little more detail available to me there. And let's see. We can put a France sum, Germany sum, France average, Germany average. And this is really going to allow us to have all kinds of great data here. Now, sometimes, though, your data is going to get a little swamped. So what you may want to do is actually separate your axes on this. So if we take a look at our average and we go to our options, notice that there's a panel options and then there's an options for the series here. What I can do is I can actually change this and put a separate axis on this, which is going to move the axis to the right. So now I've got over here, I've got my average range, and over here I've got my sum range. So this is going to separate out that data a little bit, and it's still a little hard to see. Well, what I can do is I can change this from a line to a bar, and that's going to be a little easier to tell. That's pretty close in data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this from 3 hours. We're going to go back to auto. There we go. That's a little easier to read. Okay. So there we go. We're gonna, oops, auto apply got turned off. So there you can see we've got our bars, we've got our stacked bars, and we've got our line chart all built in here. It's a little busy, I'll admit. Maybe we want to change these colors to go a lot lighter. That may help. There we go. That's a little easier to read, right? So you can play with this as much as you like. By the way, you can actually, here in your code, this is where I can change this to a custom index pattern. Right, so I can change this this index pattern from the standard that I'm on right now, which is my Apache index pattern. I can add a different index pattern. I don't have a second index pattern to show you right now, unfortunately, but this is where you would do it and just change this out to do more time series data here. But maybe what I could do would be something from the flight data. And grab the timestamp field there. Not that that's going to work because I actually don't have any data on that one, but this is where you would actually change for your second series the index pattern that you're going to be reading from. Okay, so very powerful tool there. If I wanted to do some sums here, or if I wanted to change this up a little bit, if I go back to my metrics here on my average, I can do an add metric. So here's my metric there. If I click this button, that's going to add a metric. This is going to pipeline this up for me. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do an overall max, which is one of our pipelines. There we go. Seems to have taken our axis away. I think my data has just been swamped here. If we change this out to a line, though, let's do that's already a line. There we go. Don't ever forget to tell it what you're doing the overall max on. There's your issue. There we go. So now we've got our overall max from Germany and our overall max from France. That's one of the fun things about this. You got to make sure that you got all your pieces of data filled in. So this is a very simple pipeline that we can do. Obviously, I can just dump that back out if I need to. I can add yet another series. And this is where you would actually put in something like a static value. So if I wanted a static value, and maybe I make this static value 200 million to give me a nice line. There's my static value line, and what I can do with that, if I just wanted that line to sort of lay out there on its own with maybe another dark red here for that line. And then what I can do under my options is I can change the fill to 0. And by changing that fill to 0, now I just have the line coming across. I can also turn off the dots, right? If I turn off the dots, then I've just got this line sitting up here, giving me this sort of, hey, keep an eye on this. If something pops over this, we need to pay closer attention to it. So for instance, this guy has popped over it a little bit for that particular value. And so we need to have we need to be able to check that out. Notice that there's no separate axis. This is actually using the left axis by default, but I can actually change it to use the right axis if I wanted to. If I change that to the right axis, notice that it lowers it down to my 200 million level. So it really just depends on where you want that to actually be flagged, right? Left or right, left or right. If we go over to our annotations, by the way, if you wanted to actually put in some annotations on this data, what I can do here is I'm actually going to add a data source. It's actually going to be the Apache data source that we're already looking at using the timestamp. I'm going to throw in a query string here, response 404. And this is going to pull in the 404s. I'm going to put a, let's see, we'll put a fire flag on this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a client IP, which is another field from my data. And what I'm going to do there, once I have this, is I'm going to actually put my flag on here, which is going to say, oops, client IP. And now you can see my annotations have started showing up. And maybe I say this is a suspicious client. Now, notice that this data is a little swamped right now. So let me zoom in a little bit so you can sort of see how this is going to look more close in. Ooh, lots of 404s. There we go. So once we get zoomed in a little bit, you can see that we start seeing the actual annotations pop out just a little bit more. Not that we had a lot of connections here, but oh, look at this, couple of 404s in that time period. But if I was looking at these and I saw a whole bunch of these on any particular one of these, I could say to myself, okay, somebody is hitting my server. They're getting a lot of 404s. It's maybe that they're looking for a backdoor onto a PHP or something like that, and just flag this up as such. So this allows me to have these lovely annotations that are built in as well. So let me go ahead and I'm going to turn that back off since our Apache range gets a little busy otherwise. But that is our full and formal time series visual builder. I'm going to delete a couple of these and we will come back in here. And here on our average of bytes, and we've got our two settings here for our average of bytes. Seem to have lost my pattern. There we go. Get our data back. So with this, by having them on the same axis, I can do this much easier comparison between the two. And what I'm going to do is instead of this full metric, I'm actually going to do a filter ratio. And we're going to do this as a filter ratio. And for our numerator, we're going to put in our GeoIP, country code 2 France. We'll add another one for Germany. And let's get rid of this. One moment. I've got myself all skimmwumpus here, grouped by everything. There we go. There we go. Let's get France back on there. And we're going to clone the series. And here's where we're going to put Germany. So this is going to be German ratio. And we will change our color there back to our lovely red. And this will be our France ratio. And we'll change that guy to blue. So there's our filter ratios. So notice that this is going to allow us to have a similar a similar comparison without having these huge numbers. So this is sort of an absolute, give me everything in the denominator, and then in our numerator, we're doing that there. So I can also do things like change this to GOIP, country code 2, DE, and what that's going to be is going to be a ratio of France to Germany, right? If we get rid of the German ratio, now we've got this ratio of France to Germany. So it looks like we're getting a lot of stuff from France. Right. So as soon as soon as we're above 1, we're getting more from France than we are from Germany, and below 1, et cetera, et cetera. So it really does allow us to build this out very, very easily so that we can see whatever ratios that we want to do here with these filter ratios. So let me go back and clear this out. And we'll keep this with our average of bytes. And what we're going to do is let's do our group by filters. We'll put these back in. There's Germany average again. We'll put our France average back in. We'll get rid of that. There we go. So back to our original with our Germany average and our France average. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at some of these other building blocks that we can use. So for instance, if we go over to our metric, well, look at this. We got our Germany average and our France average already there for us. Well, there's one little problem. These both say 0. And top end says 0 and gauge says 0. Again, this is going to pull from the last bucket. So if we go back to our metric here and we go to our panel options, what we can do is we can set an offset. Oh, there we go. And when we do an offset, this is going to allow us to basically move the end of our data there. So if I change that to 1 week, now suddenly we have data. Okay, so this is a very powerful tool as well. And what you would see is if you had it be now or now or now or now, this would change over time as our time series included more and more data. So over a period of 1 week, we got this 12-hour window, our average of bytes, 1,500 bytes for Germany. We got 15,000 bytes for Germany, 22,000 bytes for France for the average downloaded for that window. So this really does allow us to switch this up in whichever way we want to do. Okay. And we can actually do secondary metrics as well. So I can add another metric. So that's our average of bytes. We can do a clone series and add in another metric, and we can do our sum. And when we do this average and sum, what we see is here's our average, here's our sum. And then instead of putting average on this, maybe what I want to do is I want to put just Germany and France, since it's very clear that we're dealing with average of bytes, sum of bytes, and then we've got our country. So there's all sorts of different things that we can do here. So what we can also do is here in our options, we can actually set, on the panel options, we can actually set the color rule. And what we can do is we can change the text to, let's change the text to red. Very dynamic, bright red. And our metric is, let's say, greater than 20,000. And what that does is it now says, oh, look, okay, France is overloading our servers. They're downloading too much data or whatever it is. But that gives us this dynamic update, and we can actually change the background as well. We can change the background maybe to a yellow. And that just is going to make it pop just that much more for us. So very powerful tool there. And if obviously, if I wanted to move this around a little bit, come back to my data. If I offset this by 1 day, maybe that changes the values a little bit. Look at that, even more data that's coming in. But let's go back a week. Right, so this is going to change dynamically as the values of the data is changed. So that's our metric. Similarly, our top N is going to use the same area there. It's the same data coming in. So I've got our Germany sum, our France sum. Notice that our sums are really kind of overwhelming our averages here. So I'm going to dump my my sums for a second so we can see our averages. So there's our averages again. It gives us this nice bar chart I can go here under my metrics. I can do, instead of grouping it by filters, I can do a group by terms, for instance. So if I do a group by terms, we can do a group by terms on, let's see, what's a good value? Ooh, I know, response. So this tells us, you know what? By far, what we had were 200s. Lovely, right? Our 404s, though, we've got a bunch there. So maybe we don't care about 200s. So we come to our options and we can put a filter and we can first filter it on the response. Maybe we care about our 400 to 500 again, 550. So there's our 400 to 500. So here's our response codes that we got between 400 and 500. It looks like the 404s are the worst culprit for this. And obviously what we would want to do is, if we're getting a bunch of 404s, maybe in a slightly different time window, if we offset this series by 1 day, for instance, okay. Ooh, we got some 403s there now as well. But maybe what we want to look at is we want to have, again, a threshold on this particular one to change the background or the bar color. So if I change the bar color to maybe, again, red, or let's do orange, something orangish. If our metric is greater than 1,000, for instance, right now we want to have this bar color change. So, hey, I'm getting too much stuff. I'm getting too many 404s. Something's gone wrong. There's a bad link in our system or something along those lines that I need to now go and investigate because I've got too much bad data coming back out. Okay. So if we go to gauge, for instance, well, here's our group by, ooh, look at this. Now we've got all of these average of bytes, average of bytes. Unfortunately, it's called average of bytes because oh, well, that's part of my problem. I should have changed this to count. Yeah. Didn't have that many 404s. I knew I didn't have that many 404s in my data. But if we change this to count, it's going to give us a better gauge. So if we change this, let's say maybe we want to go back to, instead of my response, maybe we want to go to my top 10 countries. So if I go to my top 10 countries, something like this, the count of hits from my top 10 countries, let's maybe change this to, from the top 10, let's make it the top 4 so we can get a nice view here. So India, Great Britain, US, China. I'm not sure how India got in there, but if we take our panel options, and again, we can do our offsets. Offsets are in the options. We can do our offset back to 1 week, for instance, 1 week, and we can see changes in our data. Now all of a sudden US is there, and we got Kazakhstan coming into my top 4. So this gauge, again, allows us to switch this up. And of course, if I wanted to change this to if I wanted to change this and put a flag on it and change the way the gauges work, this is all done here under the options and on the panel options. So I have a gauge max here. I'm going to do as a full one. I can do this as a full circle, inner line width, gauge line width, and then of course my background color, my inner color. All of these things can be very handily switched up in any which way I want. So this does allow me to have a very flexible gauge, and not only are the gauges relatively flexible, I can also have it be flexible on what it's actually going to show me here. Right. So as I change the count, or I change who's coming in from where, I can actually get a different gauge. And of course, I have my color rules again if my metric is above or below a particular value. If I come in here to my markdown, though, let's take a look at markdown. This is different from our other markdown. So we've got these ID labels. All this data, by the way, is coming in from our overall data that we had before. I'm actually going to change our data. Instead of grouping by terms, instead of grouping by this, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to do a group by everything here for my count. I'm going to add another series for this data as well. And this is going to be a sum of the bytes, group by everything. If I come back to my markdown, now you'll notice it actually changes my value. So I've got this count last raw, count last formatted. I've got my count label, my sum bytes last raw, my sum bytes last formatted. And this is all mustache coded syntax, which allows me to be very flexible in what I'm putting in here. So I can do something along the lines of, welcome to the Apache data dashboard. And let's see, we'll just throw in a horizontal bar there because this is all markdown syntax. And we'll put, we have received, let's see, do count last formatted. So we'll just copy paste this right there. Whoops, don't forget both of them. In the last 12 hours and delivered some bytes last formatted. Let's see, of data to our customers. Instead of customers, let's use users. I like users better. Okay. Now notice this sum of bytes last formatted. It's an average of bytes. But what we want to do here on our options is we want to make sure that our number formatter is actually using bytes. And we're going to get rid of this response 400 to 500 as well. That's probably part of the reason why things are not exactly what they seem, because we want all of our data. Notice that these values for certain things are being transmitted along as I change this. There we go. 6,000 hits in the last 12 hours and delivered 18.8 gigabytes of data to our users. So that's a fantastic little tool there that allows us to use the formatted version, the count version here, and of course it'll format it out any which way you want. One more thing you can do here in the panel options is you can actually set up some custom CSS. So of course we've got our background color, all this other good stuff, what index pattern we're pulling from. But if I wanted to do something interesting, let me do a div. We're going to change the way that this looks a little bit. So we're going to do a text shadow. Right, this is something that you can do directly in your CSS these days. 1 pixel, 2 pixel. So our offsets and where it's going to land on us, and we'll just let's put some sort of gray. Let's see, 1C, 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 or something like that. Some sort of gray drop shadow. And close it off. And what do we get? Oh, a lovely drop shadow. Ugh, that's it's a little dark. Let's do C, 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 C. That's a little better, right? So now we've got this nice drop shadow available to us. The data is a little more formatted. We've got a nice display here available to us. So that's a pretty slick tool. You can put in whatever CSS you want. If you're a CSS guru, I do not happen to be a CSS guru, obviously. But if you are a CSS guru and you can actually lay this out in any which way you like, you can actually put this on your Markdown template as well, which is a huge update over the standard Markdown that you have. Last but not least, we have the table. I don't have any data to display for my selected metric, but let me go ahead and get rid of one of these. And we'll do a count. We're going to do a group by, and we will group it by our country code. So this is going to give us a nice count of who's the top of which. Okay. I don't have any custom labels, but what we've got here is our US has the highest count, then we've got France, Germany, Netherlands, China. So this is our top, how many? Top 10. Let's make it the top 4, right? So just our top 4. And let's see, for our column label, let's do our options, check our options. We're doing no filters. Finally, we got no filters on this. Hooray. But I can put a label on this or of number of hits. There we go. And for my column label here, instead of the GeoIP country code keyword, it's I can just put a country on there and get my total number of hits. It gives me this. I can add more series. So I can do now a sum of bytes. And I can even add more series to this. Maybe my average of bytes. So now I've got my country, the number of hits, the total data, the average of bytes, the sum of the bytes, and so on. I can sort. All right. I can sort by maximum average. All right. Interesting. Total data, US, total number of hits. These are all sortable tables. So this makes it gives us a very powerful tool to work with our data in this case. Okay. And that 40 minutes in is really everything that I have to show you about all of the data that's available to us in our time series visual builder. So coming back to our slide deck, I just want to say a quick thank you to folks. A couple of things that we have here. We're going to open it up for questions here in the chat window in just a second or two. And what we will see is I'll be here to answer questions for you. I'll click back over so you can actually see my face. But check us out on www.elastic.co. There's also demos on demo.elastic.co. All the products are downloadable from our /products. The discuss forums, great place to go and ask questions. All kinds of great information available on the discuss forums. Our community, we have plenty of community meetups. We have we have Elasticon tours that are going on. My next tour that I'll be attending is going to be in Toronto in September. So if you're up in Toronto in September, I'll see you there. And of course, you can always reach out to us on Twitter at Elastic. We'll open it up to questions at this point, and I will click back over and stop sharing my screen so you can see me answer some questions. There we go. Hey, folks. All righty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up. We have maybe a document running here. Okay, so we got some questions from IRC. If data is in Elasticsearch, you need to make sure index patterns are created before you visualize in Kibana. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you want to definitely do that. Can the color rule threshold be calculated or dynamic? So it's at some level it is calculated, because what we're doing there is we're actually pulling in from the metric that we're testing, but it's all greater than, less than, and so on and so forth. Beyond that, it seems like the color rule, as far as I can tell, is going to be based on whatever the metric is, and then that's really where it goes. I'm not sure I'm understanding that question. Feel free to maybe update. Finding details on formatting Markdown. That's a good one. So I'll be honest, as far as formatting data for Markdown, what you're really going to be looking at, all that good stuff is available. There's lots of different places where you can do a Markdown. Let me see if I can find one for you. Let me jump back in on the colloquy chat for you, so I can answer questions in there too. But details on formatting the Markdown, I want to say, I'm just going to Google out for a Markdown cheat sheet. I'm sure that there's one I've used regularly. Yeah, this is not a bad one. The markdownguide.org. So let me pop this in here. Oop, let me reconnect. Reconnect. There we go. There's the Markdown guide. I popped that into our chat there. Let me take a look at some other questions. Forgive me if I've missed one. Is there any way to create an alarm based on those kind of static values? Yes, as a matter of fact, Elasticsearch monitoring does give you the ability to set an alarm on these. So obviously you don't need to just stare at it all the time. But it's also handy to have, in addition to the alarms, it's also handy to have that visual cue, just to make sure that you're not missing things if an alarm goes off and maybe the person the alarm goes to is the guy who won the lottery last week and he's not responding anymore. Nah, that's probably not going to happen. But yes, you absolutely can set up an alarm. How can I have a data set for practice and run an example? Oh, cool, great question. Let me actually, I'm gonna share my screen out one more time, and let me show you this. So if I wanted to do my own data, if you come in here to the basic Kibana, and you do add sample data. One of the cool things you can do is you can add e-commerce. The sample web logs is probably the one that you might want to play with the most if you want to play with the time series visual builder. As you can see, the time series visual builder is already there. Once you build this, or once you install this, if you go over to your visualizations, that's where all my other visualizations came from, right? I've got these flights, and here's my logs, for instance. And the nice thing is that it also tells you what kind of visualization it is. So let me click over. Here is the logs visual builder, hosts, visits, and bytes table. I need to adjust my range a little bit. We'll do year to date. So I got all the data. Too big, too big. Month to date. There we go. So you can actually play with this. Here's our time series visual data. And you can play with all of this stuff here directly in the visual builder based on the imported data, right? And there's plenty of imported data. There's actually a visual builder for delays and cancellations from the flight data, so you can play with that. And there you go. There's annotations. Uh-oh, flight delayed and canceled. Flight delayed and canceled. Kibana, flight delayed and canceled. So all this data is coming in. And so if I take a look at this, by the way, if I take a look at this, this is coming from Kibana sample data flights. This is also coming from Kibana sample data flights, right? So what we're doing is we've got this nice query string. We're doing the exclamation triangle because it's bad, bad, bad. We actually lost some data, and we're pulling in our carrier, flight delayed, canceled, all that other good stuff. So that is that will give you the ability to play with the sample data, right? So that gives you nice sample data there to look at if you want to play with that. Let's see. And then the other follow on there was sample tutorials to start with learning from the beginning. Honestly, there's plenty of different ways that you can build this out. Sometimes it's handy to play with something that you already have an example for, but if you want to build it from scratch, I'm just going to say it. Take the class. You actually do that in the Kibana Data Analyst class. It's available. Obviously, if you're already a subscription customer with us, it's available to you anytime on demand. But the KDA course is an instructor-led course that you can actually take pretty much anytime you want. We run it pretty regularly. For irregular time series, another question. For irregular time series data, is there a way to force the lines to join from one data point to the next? Oh, so if there's like a gap in your data, perhaps if there's a gap in your data, how do you make sure that the time series data is actually going to come through? My best answer on that one is just to make sure that you're telling the time series data to connect up your spots. Data has time spans, events that start and end. Okay, what options are there for visualizing spans? Certainly, if you're visualizing a particular span, what you can do is you can use that time picker to build out your start and stop times. By the way, the time picker is customizable as well. You can, if you have particular events that start and end in maybe a day or the last day or the last 2 days or whatever, you can actually set up custom areas there. But I think that's what you're getting at. That's what you would do for the time picker. Of course, once you have the time picker, you can always offset as well. I'm not entirely sure if that's answering the question. So I think that may be a follow-on. So why not use the time picker in time series? There's actually, you can use the time picker in time series, and actually I was using the time picker there on the time series as well. The reason why I'd use the offset is because my time series ended just before my time picker was set up. That's just a little different there. Somebody says I'd be keen to see how to format the template for series options formatter template. I will take a look at that in just a second. But let's see, for coloring, if you set a static value, if count of response greater than 1,000, then make it orange. What if I wanted to have there we go. What if you want the 1,000 to be calculated? Is that possible? I'm not entirely sure. There's one way to find out. You can always just do it live. I know this is what got Steve Ballmer into trouble, but we'll try it anyway. So if we want it to change, we go to our metric, percent delays, and we go to our options. Oh, sorry, panel options, and we do let's see, is greater than, yeah, this looks like it just has to be a static value. It doesn't look like there's a way to change this. I can have multiples, but no, it doesn't look like it can be calculated. Yeah. It's not even letting me type anything other than numbers in there. So, Andreas, I guess the answer is sorry, but no. Drag and drop function on the visualization, it's no, not as such. What you can do is if I want to focus in on a particular area, notice that I've got month to date. If I wanted to focus in on a particular area, I can drag just on a certain area of the data, like so. And if I drag and drop on a certain area of the data, that's going to expand my time picker to a particular area. This is going to go per 60 minutes, but we can see, oh, here's our flight delays and so on and so forth. Okay. Can we visualize Cloudera distro Hadoop logs? I don't see why not. Really don't see why not. um, Role-based access control. Thank you for that answer. Any way to use computational powers of TimeLeon in the visual builder? Um, huh. I do not think so. I think the two are mutually exclusive. Good question, though. Can you apply filters to nested documents? Can you apply filters to nested documents? Hmm. That's a good one. Apply filters to the nested documents. So I'm going to have to think about that one. Another question that we have here, though, is can we show how to save these and make a dashboard with multiple visualizations? So if I go to my dashboards, here's my flights. Let's see. This has, here's one of the visualizations, the delays and cancellation visualization. Right, so that's built in there. Let's see, there's other items that folks wanted to see. Let's see, delays. If I wanted to change this up a little bit here, and we come back and I wanted to put the metric out there. Let's say we wanted to put this metric out there instead. Nope, not what I wanted. Grab that as the metric. And let's see, we'll do an edit. And let's add a metric. Visualization added. And if we come down here, there we go. So what you basically do is you go to which one you want and save it as a particular metric that you want to show off. So hopefully that's answering you there. Yeah, can't use nested fields in Kibana. Yeah, nested is not working. I think that, yeah, that's part of the issue. Is nested is just not going to work. Sorry. Is there an option to create our own indexes and aggregations when wanting to build a custom visualizer? Uh, hmm. So the indexes, I mean, just need to come from whatever index you want to use. The aggregations, that's a good question. So I can, let's see, take a look here. There's some special aggregations. I mean, series aggregations, math aggregations that you can do, but no, it looks like we are pretty set on what we've got here, right? So no scripting, for instance, to add there. Can you add machine learning forecasts to visualizations? Oh, good one. I'll be honest, I'm unclear on that one too. Perhaps somebody in the chat room with me can answer that one. That's excellent. I would imagine you can put a machine learning forecast into visualization somehow, but the answer to that question is going to have to come from somebody who's got a little more machine learning skills than I have. Let's see. When would you prefer Time Leon to Visual Builder? If I'm only dealing with a single index, and I'm not worried about multiple indices, then the time neon is um, going to be a better option. Maybe not a better option, a different option. Oh, when would I prefer stuff? That's the hard question. I'm not sure that I prefer one or the other. I really like both. They fill some different needs, but there you go. Ah, custom fields in the index. There we go. That might do it. Okay. Other questions? Let me see if I've got any other questions lurking around here. I'm still sharing my screen. Let me turn that back off so you can see my lovely face. So let's see. Um, yeah, on the scripted fields, by the way, the scripted fields in the Visual Builder right now, there's an open feature request on GitHub for that one. Let me actually show you that. I'll send you to that GitHub link if you're interested in that in more detail. Right. So that's pretty slick if you wanted to use scripted fields in the Visual Builder. Right now, can't, but we're getting there. So at this point, I will go ahead and ask if there's any other questions that folks have. I guess I timed this pretty okay because we had so many questions. Good gang of questions here. So at this point, I think we're all set with our questions, with our comments, with our updates. Here's another question. Can I build something like an APM span timeline in the Visual Builder? Hmm. That one I don't know either. If there's outstanding questions, will we get answers sent out like the link to this webinar? I'm trying to gather all the questions I can. Let me point this back in a different direction for you guys. Please, please, please do not hesitate to ask these questions on discuss.elastic.co because trust me, you guys aren't the only ones who have these questions. Folks often have questions like this. It's when I'm teaching, I'll often say, don't be afraid to ask a silly question. You're not the only person who wants an answer. You're never the only person who wants to answer. So go out there to the um, uh, go out there to discuss. Format the template for series options formatted. Oh yeah, I don't have that as part of my demo. Yeah, I didn't do that as part of my demo. I can maybe try to do it on the fly, but a little dangerous. Um, if I were to export the visualizer that was prepared, is it still possible to get to the text labels while spanning across the visual table? Hmm. Yeah, that's heavy duty. Oh, forecasting and machine learning and incorporating into visualizations. So export the visualizer that was prepared is still possible to get the text labels while spanning across the visual table. Let me go back. We'll try it. We'll try it. So if I come back here, let me go back. Unfortunately, I got rid of my I got rid of my other one. So here's our table. No data to display in the last 24 hours, but if I do month to date and refresh, ah, group by, don't forget, group by carrier. There we go. So if we group by our carrier, we've got our carrier, our percent delays. If I want to change the label here to, well, I guess percent, and then we save this one. We save this as our table, save, table, confirm save. If I come over to my dashboard and I add, there we go, flights cancellations table. That's now down at the bottom as well. Oh, interesting. Ah, yeah. See, yeah, that save process was a little bit futzed. Oh, it took away my other one too. Okay. So I need to decide how I'm going to save it, and then we'll have to create new ones. I'll have to duplicate the. I'll have to actually duplicate it in order to lay that out. I thought it was going to let me do that, and it did not. Okay, so excellent question because now I've broken this. This should not be flight delays and cancellation table anymore. It should be something else. But maybe it's because I did something weird here. Yeah, it's not letting me change this. Oh, you know what? Save as new visualization. Save as new visualization. That's my fault. I forgot to turn on save as new visualization. So we'll do a confirm save there. Let's see. Let's go back to our time series, and we will do save as new visualization, and we'll put that there like so. There we go. Now let me come back over here because I kept updating this. That's the problem. Let's get rid of this. Delete from dashboard. And we still have these crazy ones down here. Yep. Come on, crazy ones down at the bottom. If we now add just that one, let's see if we got them both now. Ugh, so much data on this page, I can't scroll fast enough to get down to the bottom. Ah, there we go. If you save it as a new visualization, we're in good shape there. That was my bad. All right. We're at the top of the hour. Folks may be coming in, coming out. Let me go back here. So hopefully Elastic S 9660, I've now solved this. Visual builder that was prepared is still possible with the text labels. Yes, I think I showed that. Separate the y-axis for 3 metrics without giving any bound information. So I can adapt the bounds whenever I click on the title in the legend associated with any of the 3 metrics previously said y-axis. My line goes straight to the bottom. Ooh. Scaling issues. I do not have a solution on that. That is really specific, unfortunately, and I don't have that particular depth of information. That would be, to my mind, that's a call to the support team. Let's see. Or discuss.elastic.co. Yeah, that's another good place. All right. So top of the hour, I'm going to go ahead and close it off here, and we will see you all the next time around. Do not forget that we've got this lovely course that goes along with this, the Kibana Data Analyst course. If you enjoyed what you saw here, imagine 2 days of it, okay? With all kinds of opportunities to practice this stuff on your own as well. It's a fantastic course. I love teaching it. I love having students come in and ask me all these questions. But in any case, thanks, folks, and we will see you next time.